There comes a moment in every soul's journey when walls begin to tremble. You see, for someone who's lived a lifetime behind emotional armor, love doesn't just knock. It shakes the foundation of everything they thought kept them safe. If an avoidant begins to open up, don't see it as a small gesture. See it as a revolution. Because for them, vulnerability is not natural. It's divine. It means they have looked at their fears, their patterns, their history of running, and said no more when they choose to stay. When they show up, when they let you see even a glimpse of what's behind the curtain. That's sacred ground. That's not casual. That's not convenience. That's commitment. See, love isn't about perfection. It's about progress. And the avoidant, when they begin to grow, they don't do it halfway. It may not look like your version of love, but it's the most courageous version they've ever known. Think about this. They've spent years equating closeness with danger, intimacy with loss of freedom. But when they start to let you in, they're saying, you're worth the risk. You're worth the fear. You're worth the change. And isn't that what love really is? Not comfort, but transformation. Not control, but surrender. Not perfection, but partnership and growth. When an avoidant chooses you for good, they're not choosing a person. They're choosing a new identity, one where love doesn't mean losing themselves, but finding a deeper version of who they are through you. So if you see it, if you feel it, don't take it lightly. Honor it. Nurture it. Stand in gratitude for it, because you are witnessing someone rewriting their emotional DNA. And remember this, the deepest connection you can experience is not when someone loves you because it's easy, but when they love you in spite of their fear. That's divine alignment. That's the universe saying this is what healing looks like. So lean in, stay grounded. Don't demand perfection, invite growth, because when the avoidant shows their heart, you haven't just been chosen, you've been trusted. And trust, that's the language of forever. Vulnerability is the ultimate act of courage for someone with avoidant tendencies. It's not simply about expressing emotions. It's about dismantling the walls that have kept them safe for years. To understand this transformation, you must first understand the silent contract they've made with themselves. If I don't need anyone, I can't be hurt. For them, independence isn't just a strength, it's survival. Every childhood moment of rejection, every broken trust, every time they felt unseen or unheard became another brick in that emotional fortress. So when an avoidant person begins to show vulnerability, it's not an accident. It's an evolution. To someone else, opening up might look like a small thing. A soft admission, a late-night confession, a moment of emotional honesty. But for the avoidant, that moment is monumental. It's the collapse of an old identity, a declaration that they are willing to risk pain for the possibility of love. They are unlearning the reflex to withdraw, to hide behind silence, to protect themselves by keeping their distance. Vulnerability, to them, feels like standing naked in a storm, raw, exposed, and uncertain. But the fact that they stay in that storm is proof that they've found someone worth staying for. When they start to open up, you may not notice it at first. It might appear subtle, almost imperceptible. Maybe they share a story about their past they've never told anyone. Maybe they reach out for comfort after a hard day instead of retreating into solitude. Maybe they let you see their frustration, their sadness, or even their tears. These are not weaknesses, they're milestones. Each moment of honesty is a small rebellion against the fear that has ruled them for years. It's them saying, I trust you with the part of me I've never trusted anyone with before. Vulnerability for the avoidant isn't a single act. It's a series of micro-decisions. Every time they resist the urge to shut down during conflict, every time they respond instead of retreat, every time they choose to speak when silence feels safer, they are rebuilding their relationship with intimacy. They are proving to themselves that love doesn't have to mean losing control. They are beginning to believe that being known doesn't always lead to being hurt. That's profound, because what they're really doing is redefining safety itself. You see, the avoidant has spent much of their life equating closeness with danger. They learn to associate need with weakness, dependence with disappointment. So when they allow you to see them in their raw, unguarded state, they're facing their oldest fear, the fear of being seen and not being enough. It's not easy for them to let go of the illusion of control, because control is how they've survived. But vulnerability asks them to surrender that control and to trust in something bigger. Trust in love, trust in you. Trust in the divine timing that brought this connection into their life. What's even more powerful is that vulnerability doesn't just change the relationship, it transforms the person. The moment they let themselves be seen, they tap into a deeper truth. Love isn't about safety, it's about authenticity. And authenticity brings a kind of peace that control never could. That peace comes from realizing that being loved for who they truly are is far more fulfilling than being admired for who they pretend to be. So when an avoidant begins to show vulnerability, understand that it's not just a gesture, it's a sacred act. They are taking the armor off piece by piece, not because they've stopped being afraid, but because they've decided that love is worth the fear. They are stepping into a new dimension of trust, not with reckless abandon, but with courageous intention. They are saying yes to connection in a way they never have before. That yes may be quiet, hesitant, trembling, but it's real. It's their soul whispering, I choose to risk being seen, because you've shown me that maybe, just maybe, I'll be safe here. Consistency is the love language of someone who once ran from closeness. For an avoidant person, showing up repeatedly, staying engaged, and maintaining presence is not a small shift. It's a profound breakthrough. Their default mode has always been retreat when emotions get intense. When conversations go deep, when vulnerability feels too heavy, their instinct has been to pull back, to protect themselves through distance. So when that same person begins to show consistency instead of disappearance, you are witnessing transformation in motion. They are retraining their nervous system, teaching their mind and heart that love doesn't have to mean losing control. It can mean stability, safety, and trust. Consistency is the bridge between fear and love. For someone with avoidant tendencies, it's the behavioral proof that they're choosing connection despite their discomfort. It's no longer about grand gestures or emotional outbursts. It's about quiet, reliable presence. They text back even when they feel overwhelmed. They follow through on plans instead of canceling last minute. They stay in the conversation when it starts to get real, even when every part of them wants to shut down. These small, steady acts are monumental for them. Each time they choose consistency over avoidance, they are saying, I want to stay connected. I'm learning to be here. What makes this shift so meaningful is that avoidants often fear being trapped. Their instinct to withdraw isn't always about rejection. It's about self-preservation. They need space to feel safe, to process, to regain a sense of control. But when they start showing consistency, it means they've begun to associate you and the relationship with peace rather than pressure. You've become a place where they can rest instead of hide. The distance they used to crave no longer feels necessary because being with you doesn't drain them, it stabilizes them. That is a massive internal shift, and it doesn't come easily. It comes from trust built over time. Consistency is their way of saying, you can count on me, even if they never say the words aloud. For someone used to emotional detachment, reliability is vulnerability in action. It's the embodiment of commitment. They're not just staying physically, they're showing up emotionally. They may not shower you with constant affection, but their presence speaks louder than any declaration. They remember what matters to you. They listen. They make an effort to understand instead of deflect. This is how they express love. Through showing up again and again, even when fear whispers that it would be safer to run. When they start prioritizing consistency, they are no longer operating from the wounds of their past. They are no longer reacting to fear. They are responding to love. It's a conscious choice, made moment by moment. It means they've realized that stability doesn't have to feel suffocating. In fact, it can feel freeing when it's born from genuine connection. They're discovering that love isn't something that threatens their independence. It enhances it. Because now, they are free to be fully themselves without disappearing to feel safe. This kind of transformation often happens quietly. It's not a sudden awakening, but a gradual unfolding. You'll notice it in the way. They start checking in more often, not because they have to, but because they want to. You'll feel it in the energy they bring. Less guarded, more grounded. They begin to replace silence with communication, avoidance with presence. They may not always get it right, but the intention is there, and that's everything. Their effort becomes the new form of affection. And the truth is, consistency is how love grows roots. Passion may spark connection, but consistency sustains it. For the avoidant, this is the first time they've allowed love to feel predictable in a good way. Predictability used to mean vulnerability to disappointment. Now it means stability, trust, and belonging. They begin to realize that. Showing up doesn't cost them freedom. It gives them peace. And once they experience that peace, once they taste what it feels like to love without running, they begin to build a new emotional home within themselves. So when you see consistency, replacing distance. Understand that something sacred is happening beneath the surface. The avoidant isn't just learning to love you. They're learning to stay. They're rewriting their emotional programming to include reliability, accountability, and genuine connection. Each moment they choose to stay engaged, they're proving to themselves that love can be safe, that they can show up and not lose themselves in the process. This is how healing looks in motion. Steady, quiet, and real. Emotional availability doesn't come naturally to someone who spent years guarding their heart. For the avoidant, emotions have always been something to control, suppress, or intellectualize. They were taught, consciously or unconsciously, that feelings were dangerous, that showing too much emotion would lead to rejection, judgment, or loss of power, so they learned to stay detached, to keep their world small, to build safety through self-sufficiency. But when they begin to choose emotional availability, it represents one of the deepest acts of trust they can give. It means they are no longer ruled by fear. They are making a conscious decision to open the door that has long been locked. Emotional availability for them is not an accident. It's a choice made after years of believing that emotions equate to weakness. It's not that they don't feel, they've always felt deeply. The difference is that for most of their lives, they've been alone in those feelings. They never felt safe enough to share them. When they finally decide to let you in, it's because something within them has shifted. They've begun to realize that emotions aren't enemies, they're messengers. That being open doesn't mean being powerless, it means being human. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual awakening, often prompted by a relationship that feels different, one that doesn't demand perfection, one that feels patient, one that allows them to unfold rather than perform. In that space, they start to test the waters of vulnerability. Maybe they tell you when something bothers them instead of withdrawing. Maybe they admit when they're scared or uncertain. Maybe, for the first time, they allow you to comfort them instead of pretending everything's fine. These moments, though they may seem small, are monumental. Each act of openness is a declaration. I'm choosing connection over control. For the avoidant, emotions have always been tied to risk. Risk of rejection, risk of judgment, risk of losing their sense of independence. Emotional availability, therefore, becomes an act of faith. It's a belief that they can be fully seen and still be loved. When they start to share their inner world, their hopes, insecurities, frustrations, they are breaking a lifelong pattern of isolation. They're saying, I want to be known. And that desire to be known, to be understood, marks a profound spiritual and emotional shift. It's no longer about avoiding pain, it's about embracing truth. What's beautiful about this transformation is that it doesn't just deepen the relationship, it heals the person. By allowing themselves to feel, to express, to connect, they begin to reclaim lost parts of themselves. The walls that once protected them become unnecessary because safety is now found in connection, not distance. They discover that expressing emotion doesn't weaken them. It strengthens the bond they share with you. It turns love from something abstract into something tangible. They begin to see that emotions are not storms to survive. They're waves that, when navigated together, bring intimacy and trust. This newfound availability also changes how they handle challenges. Instead of shutting down during conflict, they engage. Instead of masking pain with silence, they speak their truth. They start to listen more deeply, empathize more readily, and allow your emotions to exist alongside theirs. It's a dance of openness, one that requires courage every single time, because even as they grow, the old patterns still whisper, run, retreat, protect. But with each new choice to stay, to share, to connect, those whispers lose their power. When an avoidant becomes emotionally available, they're not just showing you love, they're showing you growth. They're evolving from survival mode to sacred partnership. They're learning that being emotionally open doesn't mean being consumed, it means being free. It's a different kind of freedom. The kind that comes from living authentically, from no longer hiding behind control or silence. So when they begin to open that inner door, when they start to share not just their thoughts, but their feelings, you are witnessing a quiet miracle. It's not about grand gestures. It's about real presence. They are letting their heart breathe in the open air, maybe for the first time in their life. And that act, choosing connection over isolation, truth over protection, is the purest expression of love they know. When someone with avoidant tendencies begins to share their inner world, you are witnessing one of the most profound transformations a human being can experience for much of their life. Their inner world has been a guarded sanctuary, a place no one is allowed to enter. It's where they've kept their fears, their dreams, their disappointments, and their memories hidden under layers of emotional armor. They've lived by the belief that to let someone in is to invite pain, to expose themselves to rejection or misunderstanding. So they've learned to smile, to appear composed, to keep conversations safe and surface level. But when they start letting you glimpse what lies beneath that calm exterior, something sacred is happening. It means you've become a safe harbor in a world that once felt unsafe to trust. Sharing their inner world is not easy for them. It's a slow, delicate process. At first, it may appear in small ways, a comment about their past, a confession about something that once hurt them, or an admission of what they really want from life. You might notice subtle moments when they pause before speaking, as if deciding whether they can risk saying what's truly on their heart. And then, little by little, they do. They start to tell you about their family, their upbringing, their fears of failure, or their confusion about love. Each word, each piece of truth they offer is a gift wrapped in courage. What's remarkable is that this opening doesn't happen because they stop being afraid. It happens because they choose connection despite their fear. For someone, avoidant sharing is not a natural reflex. It's an intentional act of trust. It says, I believe you can handle the truth of who I am. It means they see you not as a threat to their autonomy, but as a partner in their healing. The act of revealing their inner world is not about oversharing or dramatizing. It's about allowing another person to see the real them, the person who exists behind the mask of composure. You begin to notice that their conversations carry more depth. They start reflecting on their emotions rather than avoiding them. They might tell you what scares them about commitment, what confuses them about love, or what drives them in their work or purpose. They might open up about moments of shame, regret, or self-doubt, things they've never admitted out loud. This is not just emotional sharing, it's spiritual unveiling, because for them to be known is to risk rejection, and yet they choose to risk it anyway. That's love in its most courageous form. When they invite you into their inner world, they are not only building trust with you, they are repairing trust with themselves. For so long they have suppressed parts of who they are to maintain control and prevent disappointment. But now, as they speak, as they reveal, as they allow themselves to be seen, they are reclaiming their own authenticity. They are discovering that the truth of who they are is not something to hide. It's something to honor. You, in turn, become a mirror through which they can see their humanity reflected back without judgment. This process also deepens the bond between you in ways words can't fully capture. When someone who has spent their life protecting their emotions finally opens up, it creates a sacred exchange of energy. You don't just hear their words. You feel their vulnerability, their sincerity, their longing to be accepted. You become a witness to their transformation. They are learning that intimacy is not about dependency. It's about honesty, that sharing doesn't take their freedom away. It expands it. And the beauty of this shift is that once they begin to share, it changes the way they experience love itself. It stops being a performance and becomes a partnership. They no longer need to guess what connection feels like. They're living it. Every conversation, every revelation, every moment of truth becomes a step toward emotional wholeness. They are learning that it's not dangerous to be known, it's liberating. So when an avoidant begins to let you into their inner world, understand that this is not a small gesture. It's the highest form of intimacy they can offer. You are not just hearing their story, you are being entrusted with their soul. And in that trust lies something rare and extraordinary. The moment where fear gives way to faith, and solitude transforms into genuine connection. For someone with avoidant tendencies, conflict has always represented danger. It's not merely about the argument itself, it's about what lies beneath. The fear of rejection, loss of control, or being emotionally overwhelmed. In their world, conflict often meant withdrawal was the only way to stay safe. When things got tense, they'd retreat behind silence, distance, or distraction, convincing themselves that detachment was strength. But when that same person begins to engage in conflict rather than escape it, something extraordinary has shifted. It means they are choosing the relationship over their reflex to run. They are no longer prioritizing safety over connection. They are prioritizing truth over avoidance. When they start leaning into difficult conversations, it's not because conflict has suddenly become comfortable. It hasn't. It's because they've begun to trust that the bond can withstand discomfort. They're realizing that not every disagreement leads to abandonment, that not every raised voice means rejection. This is an entirely new emotional landscape for them. They've spent much of their life avoiding confrontation because it always felt like a precursor to loss. But now when they stay, listen, and communicate, it means they believe there is something worth fighting for. It means you matter more than their need to retreat. At first, this change might look subtle. They may not suddenly become expressive or argumentative, but you'll notice they no longer disappear after a disagreement. They might take a little time to process, but they come back. They return to talk things through. They might start saying things like, "I need a minute." Instead of walking away completely. This may seem small, but for them it's monumental. Each time they stay and engage, they are rewriting an old story, the one that told them that closeness equals danger and disagreement equals disconnection. Conflict becomes, for them, a new kind of practice, a spiritual one. Because staying present during tension requires courage and self-awareness. It means facing not only the issue at hand, but also the emotions that rise up inside, the frustration, the fear, the shame of not being enough. When they begin to navigate conflict consciously, they're no longer letting those emotions control them. They're learning emotional regulation, empathy, and patience, all skills that were once inaccessible under layers of self-protection. What's powerful about this shift is that it signals a deep level of emotional maturity. Engaging in conflict means they're now seeing love as something worth maintaining, not something to escape from when it becomes uncomfortable. They're beginning to understand that real intimacy doesn't mean harmony all the time. It means honesty. It means being willing to sit in the discomfort of difference without running from it. This is where genuine connection is forged. For the avoidant, this is the space where love stops being theoretical and becomes tangible. You might notice that instead of shutting down, they start asking questions. Instead of deflecting, they start listening. They may even begin expressing their needs more clearly, a sign they're learning to take emotional responsibility instead of hiding behind silence. This new pattern doesn't just strengthen the relationship, it strengthens their sense of self, because for the first time, they're realizing they can face emotional intensity and survive it. They can argue, express, reconcile, and still be loved. That's a truth they may never have believed before. The most beautiful part of this growth is that every time they choose engagement over avoidance, they reaffirm the bond. They are saying, "I trust you to stay, even when it's hard." That trust doesn't come from words. It comes from their willingness to stay present through friction. Conflict stops being a battlefield and becomes a bridge. It becomes a way to deepen understanding, to build emotional muscle, to practice love in its most grounded form. So when an avoidant no longer flees from conflict, when they stay to talk, to listen, to repair, it's not just behavioral progress, it's emotional rebirth. They're no longer ruled by the ghosts of the past that told them love was unsafe. They're learning that safety isn't found in distance, but in connection that endures through difficulty. In choosing to stay and communicate, they're proving to themselves that love doesn't have to mean losing control. It can mean finding balance, healing, and truth within shared vulnerability. And in that choice, they don't just protect the relationship, they transform it. For the avoidant, love has always been a double-edged sword, something deeply desired yet profoundly feared. They've spent much of their lives associating closeness with suffocation, vulnerability with loss, and commitment with captivity. Their instinct has been to maintain distance as a means of control, to protect their autonomy at all costs. But when an avoidant begins to stay, to choose consistency, and to root themselves in a relationship without feeling trapped, it marks one of the most powerful shifts they can experience. It means they no longer see love as a cage. It has become an anchor, not the kind that weighs them down, but the kind that steadies them, grounding them in safety rather than fear. When they begin to see you as their anchor, it's not because you've given them everything they want. It's because you've given them something they've never had. Space to breathe within connection. You've shown them that love doesn't demand the loss of individuality, that togetherness doesn't have to erase the self. This realization is revolutionary for the avoidant heart. For the first time, they can rest in connection without feeling consumed by it. They are beginning to understand that love can be spacious, that it can hold both independence and intimacy at once. In the past, relationships felt like confinement to them. Every expectation, every emotional demand felt like a tightening rope. The more someone reached for closeness, the more they pulled away, not because they didn't care, but because they feared disappearing in someone else's world. But when they found someone who honors both connection and freedom, the story begins to change. The walls they once built for protection start to come down, not because they're told to, but because they no longer feel necessary. This kind of love feels different. It feels expansive, nurturing, alive. Becoming anchored in love means they've discovered stability without losing identity. It means they've learned to trust that being in a relationship doesn't mean giving up control over their emotions or their life. Instead, they start to see that love can amplify who they are, not diminish them. They begin to experience partnership not as dependency but as alignment. Two individuals walking their own paths, yet choosing to journey together. This balance between autonomy and attachment is what allows the avoidant to stay. It gives them room to be themselves, while still belonging to something greater than themselves. You'll notice it in their presence. They stop fighting the current of connection and start moving with it. They no longer guard every emotion, every thought. They start expressing affection in their own quiet, intentional ways, through reliability, through care, through presence. They no longer feel the need to disappear to regain their sense of control because love itself now feels like freedom, not captivity. When they realize they can still be themselves and be loved, they relax into the relationship. That relaxation is a sign of deep emotional healing. This transformation is sacred because it represents the merging of two human needs that often seem at odds: the need for connection and the need for independence. For the avoidant, reconciling these two is the essence of emotional growth. They're discovering that true love doesn't ask them to abandon themselves. It invites them to bring their full, authentic self into the space of connection. That's when love becomes sustainable. It's no longer a battle between fear and desire. It becomes harmony between security and freedom. When they choose to stay, not out of obligation, but out of genuine peace, it means they've reached a new emotional equilibrium. They no longer need to run to feel safe. Safety now exists right where they are. They've found a partner who doesn't clip their wings but helps them soar higher. The relationship no longer feels like a loss of identity. It feels like an expansion of it. They begin to understand that love doesn't take away their power. It multiplies it. So when an avoidant sees you not as a cage but as an anchor, it means you've become their home. You've given them the rare gift of unconditional acceptance, the kind that allows them to breathe, explore, and grow without fear of judgment or confinement. And in that realization, they stop running. They stay. Not because they have to, but because they want to. They've found the kind of love that sets them free, not from others, but from the walls they built around their own heart. Thank you for sharing this journey of growth and reflection with me. Your presence made it meaningful. Goodbye for now, and may you continue to walk boldly toward love, truth, and inner freedom.